So, the first rule is narrative position. Narrative position is basically that the story takes precedence over the rules and that the rules should serve the story in some way. Next up, we have phases. The general overview of Night is that it is split into 3 phases. There is the quest phase, the thief phase, and free play. In the quest phase, you go out and you do your adventure. You save an innocent, slay a monster, uncover a mystery, whatever you might happen to do. The second phase, and very important phase, is the thief phase. The thief phase is about zooming out. So no longer are you in on the individual stories of that night, but you're zooming out to the stories of your house, the people in your house, and even all of Avalon itself. The third phase is free play, and that takes place at any time which isn't basically one of the other 2 phases, either going out on adventures or zooming out. It's those little moments that need to be taken account of. In any situation, you're going to break it up into scenes. So this could be an action sequence, such as a battle, or it could be a romantic situation, or intrigue or mystery. Every scene that takes place is further subdivided into rounds. In every round, every player gets to have a turn. They have an action that they get to do something meaningful or important. Rounds work like this. 1. The GM sets up the situation by describing basically what's happening and what the opposition or the other characters in the situation are doing. 2. The players then indicate exactly what they're going to be doing in that round. 3. The GM and players work out the dice and exactly what they're going to do with the dice. They work out whether they're going to have a check or roll effect dice. They then roll those. Also, they work out consequences, if there's any dice rolls for that. Step 4. This is where we put it back on the players. Knowing the result of their dice, whether they have consequences, whether they have a high effect or a low effect, they get to describe what they do. Attributes. There are 3 attributes in the game: Vigor, Prowess, and Wit. Vigor is your forcefulness, your strength, your toughness. It also represents your ability to project your authority, either by claiming that of others or showing it in yourself in some way. The second is Prowess, which is about your technical ability, your accuracy, your technique, and your ability to use reason. The third is Wit. Wit is your cunning, your agility, and your ability to manipulate others. Any of these attributes can be used for almost any task. The question is is how you describe what you do and what that matters for the check. Actions. In any given round, you'll have an action. And in the action, you will basically describe what you do. In terms of the dice mechanics, there are 2. The first is the check. If something happens that is dangerous, you will need to check to see if there are consequences. A check is as simple as rolling a d20 against an attribute that you have, either your prowess, vigor, or wit. You roll a d20 to get equal or below to one of your attributes. The attribute that you use depends on how you describe the action or what you do in that circumstance. If it's above, then you suffer a consequence. A consequence might be anything. Sometimes it's a dice rolled against you that lowers your endurance, just like hit points from Dungeons & Dragons. Sometimes it might be a narrative situation, such as introducing a new enemy into a scene, making something more difficult, an enemy gets away, or any other consequence that might be appropriate. Next, we have the effect die. The effect die is any of the other d4 to d12 polyhedrals that you probably have available to you. What happens there is that the GM looks at the situation, the narrative situation, and picks the dice. So if the knight, given their background, training, and skills, would be fair at a situation, then they get to roll a d6. If they'd be good at it, then they'd roll a d8. Now, on top of that, you would have any equipment of importance, such as your horse, weapon, patron spirit, or any particular traits that your knight happens to have. And those things will adjust the dice in some way. So if you have the trait of being a duelist, meaning that you are very good in one-on-one fights, if you're in a one-on-one fight, your dice size will be upgraded to the next level. The next part is activity numbers. Activity numbers are a measure of how hard or long or difficult a task may be. Once the players have all rolled effect die, that number is tallied up and compared to the activity number. When the effect die numbers cumulatively have met the activity number, that task is solved. So for example, if you're in a battle with an ogre, that might be an activity number of 20. If everyone together rolls a 15, then the ogre is not yet defeated. But we can see by the situation that the ogre is getting close to their last legs. And so when we're describing that scene, we might work that in and describe that the ogre is staggering back or so on. There may be multiple activity numbers in any given scene, as different ogres might have a different activity number, or there might only be one activity number, such as if you're in a battle, well, winning the battle might be one activity number. Simultaneous resolution of most situations. So enemies or opposition or difficulties that the knights experience don't have their own action as such and then get to roll. In fact, no one rolls checks except for the players. Other creatures might, or situations might roll the effect die, depending on what that might happen to be. The luck die is a very important and critical part of Knight. When we use the luck die, we use it to help us make a decision, to push a story in a favourable or unfavourable way. When you roll 1 is terrible luck, 6 is great luck, and all of the others measure a certain amount of either interest, good luck, or bad luck, as the case may be. We also tend to use the luck die whenever things are defeated. So if a knight becomes defeated, we might roll on the dice, that luck dice, to see how badly they are defeated. For example, if you are defeated in combat, you might roll a luck die and say, and if you get a 1, well, that could be the end of your character. If you roll a 6, on the other hand, well, maybe you're just bashed off your horse, and as soon as the narrative would indicate that you've got a horse again, then you return back up to full endurance. Traits do two main things in the system. One, they have a mechanical effect in that they will modify the effect die that you have, and in times or places they might allow you to roll advantage or disadvantage on checks. The second thing that they do is they give permission for certain aspects to happen. If your knight has the magical aspect of druid, then they have permission within the setting to begin talking about herb lore or tree lore, as well as making magical amulets or communing with spirits. Some traits may be negative, such as being stabbed in the chest. These traits simply modify the dice, but they also grant or take away permissions. If you have a broken leg, then it is not possible in the game to be able to run, for example. Endurance is a measure of how far or how long it takes before you are defeated in any given situation. It's closest in ideal to hit points from Dungeons & Dragons. It shows when you have been defeated in the situation. But endurance is more than that. So endurance, if you are in a forest, for example, and you are searching through the forest to find a hidden tower, when your endurance hits 0, that's the point when you give up. If you're in a conversation, for example, and your endurance is reduced down to 0, then that's the point when you give up on that conversation and can no longer continue. Endurance is restored whenever the story would indicate that the knight would get back up again and be able to return to the situation. Generally speaking, it either takes an action to be able to restore yourself, if that feels appropriate, or as soon as a little bit of time has gone by. For the most part, at the end of any given scene, knights will recover all of their endurance back. Example would be, if you are going and searching for that tower in the forest, you suffer a little bit of endurance damage on your way there because you get lost, maybe you go into some prickles and thorns. When you get to that tower, you're still probably tired, so you won't recover your endurance. Defeat. If your endurance goes down to 0, you are defeated, and this means that you can no longer take actions. It doesn't mean that you can't talk or do anything else. It just means that for that scene and for that situation, you can no longer have effect. Now, again, endurance can be restored by other situations, such as another player character coming and attending to your character, so you may not be out of the scene entirely. When you are defeated, it's often useful to roll a luck die to see how badly you are defeated, and this may impose a trait such as broken leg or something like that, or ashamed if you're in a social situation. Knowledge. In many games, people roll to see whether their character knows a certain fact or tidbit. In Knight, this is not the case. Your knight knows everything that a knight needs to know. They know their heraldry, they know all of the dances, they know all of the etiquette, and so on and so forth. The GM should provide that information to them freely without any problem whatsoever. Traits may give additional information, such as if you're a duelist, then you will know the other great sword fighters around, and you probably will be able to discuss things on the fine points of swordsmanship and so on. And again, the GM of the game will just tell you this information freely just by asking. If you don't have some information because you don't either have a background or a trait or something like that, then you will need to go and find that information out. Glory. In Knight, glory is your measure of power. It is a combination of your wealth, prestige, word fame, reputation amongst the land. Your glory is deeply important and reflects later on when it is time to retire your character, but it's also your ability to get things done in the system. You may spend glory to have a tower built or to hire a mercenary group for a campaign, for example. That being said, Knight is not a game about logistics and is not a game about tracking beams. It's a game about heroic and romantic adventure. So the focus is always on how much glory that you have and exactly what you do with it. What do you sacrifice to be able to win now? Death. If your knight dies, and that can happen, this can be a lethal game, then you must create the heir. You've already created the two members of your house to be able to be potential heirs for your house. When you create this heir, as opposed to going through character creation as you did with your first knight, there's a few little changes, and the first is this. If that new knight has some story or background that would give them appropriate traits, then just give them those appropriate traits. They've already had that situation happen. If that character has any problems or negative traits, that's also still the case. They also receive all of the glory that main character has received. So that's basically all of the rules of Knight as quickly and succinctly as I can put them. If you are interested in finding more or discussing them about me, come find me on my Discord or send me an email. Some of the links will be in the doobly-doo below. As always, fight well, fair knights.